welcome to the Law School Playbook. Today's topic is study aids. So as this slide shows, there are a ton of study aids available to you and information on the internet. It's a virtual sea of supplementary material that you could use in law school. This short video is designed to tell you about the different types of study aids and to cause you to be an educated consumer and making sure that you choose a supplement that simplifies things for you as opposed to complicates them further. So Lexus and Westlaw, also known as Wexus collectively, that's what you're going to be using in practice. It's a great research tool. The cases on there, which very significantly for practice is real important, they are unedited cases. It is the whole case. And rarely is there a case with just one issue in it. And so they're long opinions, they tend to be, and they oftentimes have multiple issues in them, some of which are important to you, some of which are not. This is in stark contrast to your casebooks. Your casebooks contain cases that have been very carefully edited by the textbook author to sort of get to the point. Why are we putting this in the casebook? You need to focus on this particular issue or these particular issues. So if you go to Westlaw or Lexus looking for your cases and look them up on there and try and use the head notes, you're going to find, boy, I don't remember reading that in my textbook. Or worse yet, if you're using it in place of your text, you're going to, go down the rabbit hole of investigating a bunch of issues that you otherwise wouldn't need to. And this is the same for their briefs and their outlines. They use the unedited cases that are contained within their databases. So while Lexus and Westlaw are terrific tools for many reasons, I would steer you, if you're just looking to look up case information, you're not using it for legal research and writing, I would steer you to other resources. And there are several reasons for this, the unedited aspect being one, and then the other is that the head notes and the briefs, they're written by, staff attorneys, people working for those companies and not necessarily professors. So I'm going to show you some alternatives to using that as your supplement. So these are examples from Lexus. They are not in the Lexus database. You have to go to them through different channels or perhaps buy a hard copy of the book or the electronic copy of the book, depending on what your law school has access to. But you'll note, for example, the one on the left is written by one of my colleagues, Jeff Ferriel, who is a professor at Capital University Law School. It's not written by a staff person. So Professor Ferriel is an expert on this topic. So this is his take on the broad concepts outside of a casebook to assist you. And then there's things like the Q&A series, which are question and answer. They have them in every subject. So I want you to look at the different uses of these types of supplements. So understanding contracts, the understanding series, and again, this is in pretty much every topic you can think of. They're a treatise. They are a broad introduction to the topic. So, unlike your casebook that's organized by cases, these are sort of organized by concepts, and they give you the overall picture of the given concepts that you're studying in your course. So they provide some context. So if you're unsure about a concept, you don't have to read a book like that, or you shouldn't read a book like that from beginning to end. You're looking things up in it to help you with your studying. In contrast, the Q&A series, I direct students to if they're looking for practice, what I call the testing effect, okay? So that's different from kind of just digging your hands in and trying to wrap your mind around a concept initially. When it comes time to practice, the Q&A series is a good resource for you. Again, it has multiple choice and short answer questions arranged topically, and it has the answers in there, hence the name. So you can see what you're getting, what you're not getting, and then maybe go back to something like a treatise or your class notes to see, or your outline to see where you may be getting confused. These are examples from Wolters Kluwer. Again, there are different types. So, you know, the Glannon Guide, I know is very popular for torts. They have it, Glannon Guides in almost every subject. And again, these are multiple choice questions and analysis. So this is a practice tool. The same for examples and explanations, also a practice tool when you're ready to test yourself. So hypothetical questions with detailed explanations. In contrast, if you're not understanding a topic, if you are looking to check your rule statement to see if it makes sense, see if you missed anything, you're going to use something like an outline that is done by manuals. Again, these have authors, named authors. This particular book is keyed to certain texts. Not all of them are, but you may find one that corresponds with your book. The cautionary piece is that these outlines are very comprehensive. They contain a whole bunch of information you may not cover in your class. So whereas you might spend one day on landlord-tenant law, this book may have an entire chapter devoted to that. So be sure that you use what you are covering in class to frame your use of a supplement, because otherwise you can spend a whole bunch of time on things that are not necessarily helpful to you. And again, they confuse and make things more complex as opposed to simplify. Here's more examples. These are from West. Gilbert's is basically very similar to a manuals. Again, it's law summary, general outlines by topic, helping with rule statements, helping just, you know, lay out concepts in a very concrete way. And criminal law, or any of the In a Nutshell series. There are people who love these. I wasn't a huge fan, but, you know, because they require kind of more reading. It's more sort of in the narrative form and less look things up quickly. But if you're really interested in a topic and you want to dive into it and get a general overview, the In a Nutshell series is a good one to look to. Now, these are just examples. There are so many more. These, I will tell you, are really the sort of popular and widely used ones. There are others, and you have to find the one that works for you. But the key is to figure out, why am I using this? So am I using this to help me shape my outline? In which case you want to use something like the law summaries or the outlines. And then otherwise you're using things like the Q&A series, the examples and explanation series, things like that, to test yourself and make sure you're understanding the concepts. And the testing yourself, you know, you'll hear me preach again and again, is something that you want to do throughout the course of the semester. You do not want to wait until the eve of exams until you're ready to practice. This is something that you should be doing all semester. So your studying is basically going to boil down to class prep is just one piece of the studying. It's not enough. It's actually not studying. It's preparing for class. And after your class, you're going to look at your notes, figure out, you know, make sure the information you have in there is correct, identify any holes, and eventually you're going to take a whole bunch of things. You're going to take your briefs, you're going to take your reliable supplements, such as a law summary or an outline or a treatise, and any sort of work you did in class. You're going to take all those ingredients and you're going to sit down to make an outline so that you can leave your casebook, the briefs, your class notes behind, and use that as a study tool. So that's one way of studying, is the outlining. But then there are two more ways you have to study. You have to spend time memorizing the rules. Unfortunately, this is what we require in law school, even though practice doesn't require it so much other than the rules of evidence and courtroom rules. We tend to look things up as lawyers, but this is how the bar exam tests, so we tend to mirror that in law school. So you have to memorize all the rules and the sub-rules. That's one piece of studying. And then you have to do the practice questions to test your knowledge. So those are all discrete sort of forms of studying that should have presence in your daily schedule, your weekly schedule, your monthly schedule. So I'll do a separate video on that, but I couldn't resist the temptation to talk about it here. Okay, I just want to say a quick word about Quimby. I'm fine with Quimby. Some professors aren't. Quimby is a pay service. Some law schools provide it for free, but certainly not all. And it's sort of a catch-all, right? It has canned briefs, it has videos, it has texts that you could read and learn from. So it has a lot of different components. The tricky thing with a thing like Quimby is that at some point I see a shift where students start replacing their own reading with Quimby. And I would advise so strongly against that. You go to law school to learn legal skills. You don't go to law school to necessarily learn substantive law. You learn how to be a lawyer, how to look things up. So, the tax law, for example, may change when you get into practice, but you have the skills as a lawyer to look up what the new code is and how it works with respect to cases. So if you don't read for class, you are replacing very important information with a substitute like Quimby, and you are not therefore developing your skill of reading cases efficiently and effectively. And when you get into practice, there is no Quimby. A partner doesn't give you, an assignment and then you say, okay, well, let me go to Quimby to try and figure out the answer. That will not be the case. That is when you're going to use Westlaw, Lexus, perhaps a treatise if it's a new subject matter or another kind of secondary source. But so keep Quimby, if you decide to use it, along with any other study aid, sort of in its box of what purpose it's supposed to serve. It is supposed to supplement and confirm your understanding and identify gaps in your learning. So as long as you use it truly as a supplement, any of these resources are fine, as long as they're simplifying things for you and truly supplementing what you are doing to prepare for class. Okay, so the bottom line is, you have to choose your supplements thoughtfully. You are going to hear from fellow students that they love so-and-so. It's changed everything for them. That might not work for you. So be an educated consumer. Figure out, you will open, the law summary and you will say, oh my gosh, this is so clear. I definitely need to use this. This is so helpful. That's how you should feel about the study aid you select. And remember, not one size fits all, and they serve different purposes. So figure out why you need this particular supplement. I would recommend having one in every course. Just something that you don't even have to refer to it daily. Just when you sit down to outline, making sure that you have all the rules, that you have all the sub rules. And then if you're looking for practice materials beyond what your doctrinal professor gives you, because that is the absolute end all be all. That's the person who's testing you. That's the person who's giving you your grade. So that's where you want to go for practice material and rule statements and all of those things. But if you are looking for outside testing material, there's a lot of examples here. And I'll mention one last one before I go. There's also Cali, and Cali is similar to Quimby in the sense that it has lessons, there are videos, it has, multiple choice questions. I've heard the property ones are particularly good on there. Lots of law schools provide Cali for free. So if you're unsure about any of this, what you can get for free versus paid, talk to your librarian. Your law librarian will be able to direct you to the study aids available, both electronic and hard copy. And oftentimes knows, professor preferences and things, but do not hesitate to reach out to your professor to ask as well. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions. But in the meantime, just do your best and I'll be rooting for you.